Good evening, everybody. We're going to give it a few more minutes here before we actually start. Don't want to start the meeting too long before 7 p.m. because I'm back to a regular Zoom platform. I've only got 40 minutes to do this, but we'll get her done. We'll get her done. Just breaks it into smaller pieces. So just hang out, and we'll be getting going here at 7 o'clock. Thank you for joining. And we're going to be talking about the Lieber code tonight for everybody's information. And the reason we're going to talk about the Lieber code is because we have to learn how to stand up for ourselves. And in this regressive government, nobody else is going to do that for us. And that includes in presentation of paperwork or out in the streets and protesting, whether you're peacefully protesting and violence breaks out or not. If you're partaking of that, you've got to stand up to the ability of military enforcement of that very peace that you profess to be in. You can't know peace without knowing the military enforcement. And that's one of the concepts we have to realize when it comes to these court documents and stuff. They're all mercantile presentations in civil venues. And these are
President, I call the media mob, and
directly related to the Admiralty because it's a dual venue system. When you walk into a court, you know it's a civil action, and they've got that military flag up there showing Admiralty. Then we know it's a Admiralty venue, and that we have some kind of power in there if we only know it. And so by knowing this power, both in your First Amendment right, freedom of expression, where it's defined specifically as the redress of government. You know, we have the right to petition a redress of government. That belays the sense in writing things down or going out and verbally protesting and chanting stupid chants. Whereas the Second Amendment speaks about the expression of right to redress that government through military arms, militia, the right to bear arms. And it further explains that the people are the ones that delegate the powers to government to begin with. And we do this simply by joining a community, and that's through our own actions, our own physical actions, before we start signing any documents. So when we come into that community and they start asserting those documents against us, we have to go back to the edge of that jurisdiction and say, okay, where's my true jurisdiction? My true jurisdiction is not in some kind of legal title standing, but in my physical standing of where I've placed myself. Have I placed myself in a group of people that are of like mind? If they're of like mind, if I firmly believe that and they believe that as well through these commercial instruments, then I need to know those commercial instruments. If they're using them against me, and I can at least relate that, I can still step back out into that physical enforcement zone of my own, saying, okay, I no longer wish to have part of this community, and just move. If I stay in that community, I have to be able to further assert my own military presence. And that military presence, as I've explained before, isn't necessarily in your right to bear arms as it's literally written down. People get things backwards, and when I talk about the right, when I see the right to bear arms, I turn it all around and I see my right to armorial bearing, and that takes me back to that which clothes me, that which armors me, and that is the full armor of God. Now, when we talk about the full armor of God, and yet talking in peace, like I said, if you know peace, if you profess to know peace, then you have to know the military side of it. And so when it comes to the right to bear arms and the right to armorial bearings, it's that which protects me is the way I present myself physically, verbally, not vocally and not literally, but verbally. And that's why we're going to talk about the Lieber Code tonight and why it's so important in being able to rebut this stuff. I've got 11 cases on the record that I signed UCC 1-308 and then never never showed up in their forum. I never showed up in their court. I maintained my physical presence away from them. They are still on that record, but they have no enforcement. They've acquiesced to certain elements between now and then that are no longer justiciable. They've already been adjudged. Now, whether they adjudged them in their opinion or according to law makes no difference to me, because if it ever comes to rise to the surface, I again have the knowledge within myself now to be able to simply just rebut it. This is the importance of knowing this stuff, researching it and learning it. Okay, and so we're going to go to the Lieber Code. And I express this because, like I said, the merchant venues that they're using have a duality to them, and we see this when we go into these courts, and we see that Admiralty flag. So even if you do go into that venue, you can still provide the right information if you know it, to stop it at that point and let them know, okay, now I'm physically present. And this is one of the maxims of law: the presence of the body cures the error in the name. This is also referenced in the legacy in regards to the new covenant. It doesn't matter if you're Judaic or not, so long as you follow his word. As long as you follow his word, you have a right to his legacy to pass on his word to your younger children, your younger generations. So when we look at the Lieber Code,
I see, for example, that you promised that ICE next week will begin.
This is what I'll do here real quick. I'll go ahead and stop this share. I'm going to post this in the chat bar. And this is the link that we're on.
My question to you is, there are some people that will
let me know if that link works.
Well, you know,
somebody,
which I have, and
somebody let me know if that link, make sure that link works for me. I might have messed it up. I couldn't quite see the whole link. I believe it should though. But this is what we're looking at. And this is the what's known as the General Orders 100, the Lieber Code. And everybody talks about this, that Abraham Lincoln supposedly wrote this up. And actually it was prepared by Francis Lieber. And it was promulgated as General Orders number 100 by President Lincoln on April 24th of 1863. This is after the Civil War started. Instructions for the government of armies of the United States. So even at this sense, we're still talking about the United States being a corporate entity in 1863, okay? The armies of the government of that United States are also incorporated, and we can look this up and verify this today under the Dun and Bradstreet. Look up the Army, United States Army, look up the United States Navy, look up the United States Marines, look up United States Airport, which is actually part of the Navy. Look up all these different branches and find out they're all going to have Dun and Bradstreet numbers. Adjutant General's Office, 1863. The administrative functions in the War Department. They're not judicial. They're not legislative. They're not executive. They're administrative. Pure and simple. That's all they are. So when we see that, and we realize that they come from the government printing office, promulgated by President Lincoln in 1863, and they were merely prepared by Francis Lieber, where is the authority? Again, right here, your own ability to stand up for yourself. And that's why we reference this, because no one else is going to do it for you. Pure and simple. And then, again, that's why I reference the armor of God, because if we're going to stand up in our ability to fend for ourselves, that is truly the armor that's going to help provide you the truth to this system and how it works. So when these goons walk up to you with guns and stuff and talk to you and want to talk to you about ID and let me have your name and this and that, and we're investigating you for harboring fugitives, it's sweat off of a duck's back. It's knowledge. And this is the way the entire system operates. And it's simply because they have to protect their own. In the commercial system, every officer has to protect his own family. In that commercial system, the only way he has to protect it is by protecting his paycheck. If people can learn to go back to their natural lives and learn how to live without the paycheck, for the love of money is the root of all evil, people. And the dependency upon it is just as bad. It's a convenience. And that's all you're using it for, is convenience. You're allowing somebody else to stand up and fend for your rights. Okay, in Article 1, martial law, military jurisdiction, military necessity, retaliation. When they're in a commercial system, a merchant system, remember, it is never once seen as merchant admiralty law. It has always been recorded admiralty merchant law, because in order to transport your merchant wares from one land to another, being separated by a body of water, you had to have a naval force to protect you on the waters in case there were other foreign lands upon that same body of water that might prevent you from reaching your destination. You have to protect your own wares in commerce. Commerce is the action from point A to point B. Beginning of contract, end of contract. Pure and simple. A place, a district, or country occupied by an enemy stands. A place, district, or country occupied by an enemy stands. In consequence of the occupation. In consequence of the occupation. If you're admitting that you're occupying an enemy's lands, you have to also admit to the consequences of that occupation. As we see it today, the consequences of that occupation is people socially distancing themselves, wearing masks, and allowing commercial entities to biasly discriminate against them because somebody else is trying to assert a military enforcement with people that wear weapons to protect their paycheck. That's the only way to defend against this, if you honestly believe that that's what you're defending against. You don't have to go out to the streets and protest. You don't have to use the military enforcement in a military and physical action by wearing a gun and shooting somebody, or wearing vests and all kinds of weaponry. You don't have to do it that way. You do it through the armor of God, which is his word, the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, cinched up with the belt of truth, while bearing the sword of the Spirit and shielding yourself with the shield of faith, while walking in the boots of the gospel everywhere you go. That's your military enforcement. His army. And this is just uniform with it. And we'll learn that as we go. Under the martial law, under the martial law of the invading or occupying army, whether any proclamation declaring martial law or any public warning to the inhabitants has been issued or not. So when we get into these debates about the Civil War never being consumed with a treaty of peace, this is telling us it doesn't have to be. Whether it was issued or not, martial law is the immediate and direct effect and consequence of occupation or conquest. So they're admitting that we have the right to our own military effect. Get it? Okay, again, back to the Second Amendment. This does not say that we have to act like them and start wearing full body armor and militarize ourselves with their weapons, like I discussed in a video not too long ago. The story of David and Goliath is very important to comprehend, that Goliath didn't go out there and defeat, or David didn't go out there and defeat the Goliath by arming himself with this massive sword and go out and gut the guy. He armed himself with a new weapon. One his opponent wasn't familiar with. These guys aren't familiar with people asserting truth. And this is why I talk about their affidavits and their statements. All of their statements and all their court things are known as rebuttable. And all you got to do is make a statement rebutting their statement that is not rebuttable. What is not rebuttable? What is done is what ought be done. Their own maxims that they use. And we're supposed to use this against them. Use thine enemy's weapon against them. How do you use their weapons against them? By knowing their true weapon. Their true weapon isn't the gun. Their true weapon is right here. They've enslaved they've shackled your mind by putting a fear that they're going to shackle your body. Get over it. The presence of a hostile army proclaims its martial law. The presence of a hostile army proclaims its martial law. Guess what? Remember we discussed where the authorities come from? We're looking at UN. UN is, the United Nations is what follows this. So it's a common thing known internationally that most countries of the world agree to. And again, I'm professing that it's common sense, because in consequence of the occupation right there, regardless of how they look at it, I look at that as their admittance to not only the consequences of somebody else bearing arms against them, but the very right of the other person to do so. Article 2. Martial law does not cease during the hostile occupation except by special proclamation ordered by the commander-in-chief or by special mention in the Treaty of Peace concluding the war. Well, if the Treaty of Peace concluded the war, and the United States is a member thereof, then why is the Lieber Code still used as enforcement of conclusion of the war? Again, because it has to show uniform throughout all jurisdictions. And in being a part of the army of our Father which art in heaven, they can't erase this. What is done is what ought to be done. All they did was merely wrote it down. As it is written, so shall it be done. Sorry, guys. It's in, on, and for the record already. I'm not going to let it disappear. I'm going to keep it by giving it away. That's why I posted the link. I hope you guys all got that link, marked it up as a favorite. Copy the sucker down, print it up. That's what we need to start doing. When the occupation of a place or territory continues beyond the conclusion of peace as one of the conditions of the same. So, in the concluding of the War of Peace, they included the Lieber Code when the occupation of a place or territory continues beyond the conclusion of peace as one of the conditions of the same. So they included the Lieber Code as part of the Treaty of Peace. And that's why it's still in force. 3, martial law in a hostile country consists in the suspension by the occupying military authority of the criminal and civil law and of the domestic administration and government in the occupied place or territory, and in the substitution of military rule and force for the same, as well as in the dictation of general laws. The dictation of general laws according for that apply to the general public. These are your state statutes, your federal codes that the general public can look up online. As far as military necessity requires this suspension, substitution, or dictation. As far as military necessity requires this suspension, substitution, or dictation. Dictation. All they've done is once now asserting the military form, have changed the dictation of the substitutions and suspensions of the general laws before it. So all they're doing is converting the general laws from time to time to time. And each time they do it, and then substitution of military rule and force for the same. The commander of the forces may proclaim that the administration of all civil and penal law. Notice before it was of criminal and civil law. Now it's civil and penal law. Penal law refers to courts martials. Again, that's why you see the Admiralty flag. The penal laws that they provide for in the federal statutes, you know, the ones under Title 18 that say so many years and so much of a fine, those are the penal laws. Those are military codes for courts martials. Those still are not common law sentences. Period. The penal law here in the United States, according to the Lieber Code and the United States Penal Code under that, would be different than the penal code of, say, over in England and the codes under which it follows the Lieber Code over there. Here you might get 10 years for the same sentence that you, or same crime that you might get over there for 5 years. So the penal codes are the general laws that are substituted militarily for what was the general laws before, or what are the general laws in a different place, territory, or country. Article 4. And I'm going to finish up with this one and go to some discussion, because we're going to have about 15, 20 minutes left then. Article 4. Martial law is simply military authority. Okay? Break it down as simply military authority exercised in accordance with the laws and usages of war. Whose war? What kind of war? Is it a commercial war where you need a commercial treaty? Is it a physical violent war where you need a military of man? Is it a spiritual war waged upon people's mind where we have to really get down to the logic and reason behind things and really connect our mind with our heart and the words that are written there? And one's regal legacy to fend for themselves in that right. What's the difference? So martial law is simply military authority under his full armor, exercised in accordance with laws and usages of his war, and any satanic evil creature that would come against one of his children of his kingdom in any manner or form, using any kind of weapon. Period. Military oppression is not martial law. So when these officers threaten you and come out here with all these tasers and pepper spray and physically abuse you, that is not martial law. That is, in fact, violating the very martial law they are subject to. They are subject to a commercial treaty, which is bound by international treaty, which ties into the Lieber Code, that them being militarized, carrying a military weapon under a private contract. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. It is the abuse of the power which that law confers. As I just said, as martial law is executed by military force. So when they execute military force, they are executing military law. Period. They put themselves in that jurisdiction. They are the ones waging war. This is why I try to urge people, remain calm. Keep yourself at peace. I'm learning much greater today to come in peace, be in peace, and leave in peace. You know, when I had my child 4 years ago, I was cussing and swearing. I was fingering him. I was like this, calling him communist and everything. And I'm not proud of it. I do have a certain level of respect for my behavior and being able to look back on it and learn and educate myself and know how I need to come better in peace at all times, no matter what the war is, no matter what kind of weapons they try to use. It's very important. It says, as martial law is executed by military force, it is incumbent upon those who administer it. Administer. And I want to make a very clear point here. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I'm not supposed to retribute. That means I'm not supposed to raise any kind of weapon, even if I am harmed. So these people raising weapons to begin with is already a fatality. And it says specifically, it is incumbent upon those who administer. The minister part is important because that is the boots of the gospel. When he steps out of that patrol vehicle and steps on land with his boots and professes to minister the word of God in peace while wearing somebody else's armor other than the armor of God, I call judgment already. I call a judgment of my own discretion already. You don't need to come up to me with any kind of weapon. Despite any kind of criminal history I got, you can look it up. It's all public. Tell them something they don't know about me, because everything on that record you profess to me to be me, for me to be some kind of violent person, says otherwise. It is to be strictly guided by the principles of justice, honor, and humanity. Again, ministering his words of justice, honor, and humanity, to love him with all of your heart, body, and soul, to love thy neighbor as thyself. So long as you've done this, you have fulfilled the law. Virtues adorning a soldier even more than other men. Because I say truly, even though I've never been at the line of war, to be able to stand there and not kill the man that killed your brother or your father, because you know already, and you stand steadfast on your square, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. It shows that you have some kind of true forgiveness in your heart, and that's what forgiveness is. Letting go and let God. I'm sure a lot of 12-steppers heard that one. For the very reason that he possesses the power of his arms against the unarmed. This is what tells us. Right there. Virtues adorning a soldier even more than other men, for the very reason that he possesses the power of his arms against the unarmed. Okay. So I hope everybody comprehends that and how powerful that is when we talk about these incidents like Minneapolis. You know, we get up in arms. We need to start preventing this stuff in a peaceful way before it gets to that level. We have to take on model examples from around the world I believe it's Switzerland or Sweden or a few countries actually that have weaponless police that go out and hit the streets, and they only call upon weapons in dire situations where those said police officers without weapons can't de-escalate a situation. And this is training that we need to provide as for a greater impact, not just for our police force, but for those of us that are bringing up children and younger generations that are going to be policing ourselves in our older generations where we can't do that ourselves. We have to be able to instill these virtues into these younger generations, as well as the generations that are coming up into it now, through training in both sections, the policing now and in our own upbringing of our younger generations. And this includes in the religious forums, the political forums, the educational forums, our home platforms, anywhere our children are at. We have to instill in them the virtues of not raising arms against somebody that hasn't raised arms against us. Simply because somebody has said something or called somebody a name doesn't give anybody a right to bear arms against them. What it does do is give them information if they observe correctly and respond accordingly in a peaceful manner, a way to discern whether they want to travel forward in the boots of the gospel, or if it's really worth his time to just back off and maybe go somewhere else. And that's the importance of individual discretion between each and every one of us. And it's one of the things that I wish that people would realize. We really need to quit seeing these videos like we saw in Minneapolis. We have to see more of people standing up and stopping these incidences before they come to completion. You know, granted, there's a necessity at a certain point in time where we need to videotape this stuff. We need to video record this stuff. And we're getting there. And we really need to do it more. But at the same time, I'll profess that we need to throw them down more as well and stop the progression of these physical actions physically. You know, that's your brother being strangled to death. And that way, if it is truly a true event, guess what? Guess what? The false flag is ruined. The sheeple standing by watching and not actually doing anything about it and not actually getting involved and pulling away the guy that's, you know, trying to rescue the guy that supposedly just got shot and find out it's fucking maple syrup with food coloring. You know, come on. Let's get more involved, but we've got to do it in all the different venues, not just videotaping, but the physical thing. You know, we've got this whole program of government institution called Big Brother keeping an eye on us. We need to keep an eye on Big Brother. That's our responsibility. We need to realize that their system is mimicking what we're supposed to be doing, and we need to take that back inherently. Get rid of the convenience that we belayed upon them all. And that's truly what they're using against us. If we don't know how to stand in honor and integrity without raising arms ourselves, and again, that's why I say if we can't show that we can go out and peacefully protest our government without all the violence and riots and burnings and stuff like that, then that's proof that we don't know our own military power and responsibility. Because again, if you're going to profess that you're peacefully protesting and cannot control the people within that protest physically so that they do not raise violence against buildings, the owner of the building wasn't even there. How could they be part of the protest? How could they be professing some kind of violence towards the